Tonight, a jump in the number of coronavirus cases in New South Wales. The federal government looks at forcibly detaining patients to try to control the spread. Good evening, I'm Juanita Phillips. This is ABC News. Interest rates cut to a new record low to counter the coronavirus economic fallout. Pharmaceutical giant Johnson & Johnson ordered to pay more than $2.5 million to 3 women injured by faulty pelvic mesh implants. And a blow to Australia's T20 World Cup campaign ahead of the semi-finals. Australians are being told to brace for drastic measures in the event of a full-blown outbreak of coronavirus. The federal government says it has the power to lock down whole areas of the country and to detain anyone suspected of carrying the virus. It's warning that people might be shocked at what's to come. The number of Australian cases today jumped to 38. There are 4 new cases in New South Wales, including the first one that appears to have come from Singapore. And a student from China who spent 2 weeks in Dubai so he could enter Australia has tested positive after arriving in Brisbane. From Canberra, political reporter Jane Norman begins our coverage.
Thriving cities turned into ghost towns. Public transport shut down, patients forcibly quarantined. Extreme measures in the epicentre of the coronavirus outbreak.
They're very important laws.
Not dissimilar to powers available here.
They will be, in some instances, strange and foreign to many Australians.
The Commonwealth's activated laws never used before, allowing authorities to declare special quarantine zones that people would be banned from entering and imposing control orders on those suspected of carrying the virus, forcing them into isolation.
If people were declining to abide by the conditions of a control order, some forms of detention are available.
The unprecedented measures are a last resort to deal with a major coronavirus outbreak. But regardless, Australians are being told to prepare for disruption. Depending on the rate of spread, aged care homes could be locked down, childcare centres and schools closed.
It's very bad because kids can't stay home.
It wouldn't be the end of the world, but I'd probably go a bit crazy.
So far, the numbers in Australia are low and most of the cases contracted the virus overseas.
There is no evidence of sustained or widespread community transmission in this country.
For now, the focus is firmly on travellers returning from coronavirus hotspots like Iran, Italy, South Korea and Japan. They're being told to self-isolate and avoid close contact with other people, including shaking hands.
We're not suggesting that those practices should be considered by the broader general community.
Other practices being discouraged, panic buying.
I can understand the anxiety that's out there in the community.
It's prompted a prime ministerial intervention. Coles and Woolworths have assured him that supplies won't run out, while local production of toilet paper is being ramped up just in case.
And I'm sure that'll come as a great relief to everybody.
The Prime Minister's refusing Labor calls for a major stimulus package to shield the economy from the coronavirus fallout, insisting this is not another global financial crisis. Instead, he's preparing to announce moderate support for industries including education and tourism to keep cash flowing and businesses afloat. Jane Norman, ABC News, Canberra.
Interest rates have been cut to a record low of 0.5% as the Reserve Bank seeks to contain the economic impact of the coronavirus. All 4 big lenders have passed on the cut in full after the Prime Minister took the unusual move of calling on them to do so before the official cut was announced. Finance correspondent Philip Lasker reports.
The empty shelves at this neighbourhood supermarket tell a story of coronavirus fear.
Things are out of stock from the warehouse level. We are trying to, particularly sanitizers. Sanitizers are too much in demand. Sanitizers, masks, they're out.
It's a small example of what's happening right across the country.
So RBA cut 25 basis points as expected.
This broad economic threat has forced the Reserve Bank to cut rates, the first central bank in the developed world to do so since the virus outbreak. In its statement, it pointed out that the coronavirus is having a significant effect on the economy. that the uncertainty is likely to affect spending, that economic growth right now is likely to be noticeably weaker than expected, and that it's difficult to predict how large and long-lasting the effect will be.
Rate cuts are really in part designed to short circuit that really poor confidence and the downward spiral in risk assets, which can feed through to the real economy.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison took the extraordinary step of virtually flagging a rate cut before it happened, pressuring lenders to pass it on.
I would expect they would do the right thing by those Australians who are looking to see any support that the Reserve Bank would be seeking to provide at this time for these reasons.
All four major lenders obliged, passing on the full 25 basis points, which means a monthly saving of $60 on a $400,000 standard variable loan. But savers will be worse off. The Prime Minister's comments left financial markets with the impression that the Reserve Bank could take even more drastic action. Now there's a lingering sense of disappointment, which the RBA probably didn't want. The RBA said it's prepared to cut rates again, but there was a clear message to the government to do more.
There is a very pointed reference to the government assisting areas most affected by the coronavirus.
It's unlikely the government needs any more convincing. Philip Lasker, ABC News.
There are now 13 confirmed cases of the COVID-19 virus in New South Wales. Today's new cases all involve people who've recently travelled overseas. Authorities have thanked them for quickly seeking medical help when the symptoms first appeared.
In full protective gear, these paramedics were taking no chances, called to a patient who was worried he might have coronavirus. The ambulance was decontaminated afterwards. He's one of a number of people being extra cautious as confirmed cases rise. There are 4 new cases in New South Wales, bringing the total number to 13. They include a 39-year-old man who had visited Iran, a 53-year-old man who flew in from Singapore, and 2 women in their 60s who had arrived from South Korea and Japan have also been diagnosed with the virus.
We are seeing quite an escalation of diagnoses of the virus.
2 people have caught the virus here, a woman in her 40s and a 53-year-old doctor.
The doctor was working at the Ryde Hospital here in Sydney, and New South Wales Health has been working very hard to establish which staff were in close proximity to the doctor and also which patients.
He certainly would have encountered a large number of patients.
A number of healthcare workers and patients are now in quarantine. The Chief Health Officer says they don't know how the doctor got the virus. At GP practices, they're preparing for a potential pandemic.
Working out who is sick and where to put them and how to swab them and how to keep the rest of our patients and our doctors safe.
If you're suspected of having the coronavirus, your consultation won't look like this. You will be made to wear a mask and placed in an isolation room away from other patients. Your doctor will be covered from head to toe. In several Sydney supermarkets, stocks are running low.
Empty, 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 lots of empty shelves, toilet paper, Kleenex, tissues mainly.
I'm telling you, there's a big rush on in there for everything. It's madness.
Retailers say there's no need for panic buying.
We understand that consumers are worried, maybe even scared. But here in Australia, the crisis is very mild.
They say the shelves won't be empty for long. Philippa McDonald, ABC News.
The World Health Organization says the number of new coronavirus cases outside China is now almost 9 times higher than inside the country. In Japan, almost 1,000 people have been infected, and that number increases every day. The government there has been criticised over its handling of the outbreak. And with the Tokyo Olympics just months away, there's a lot at stake. North Asia correspondent Jake Sturmer has more.
Everywhere you go in Tokyo, there's almost guaranteed to be a crowd. Perfect conditions for the transmission of a highly infectious and deadly virus. Government officials believe that it could be young people with mild symptoms who are causing the most damage, and yet they're not being tested because their symptoms aren't serious enough.
To prevent elderly people from dying, we need to prevent young people getting infected.
In this Tokyo clinic, Dr. Shinichi Nishida is assessing a 70-year-old man who's been coughing for days. He believes the man should have a coronavirus test, but when he calls the public health centre to order one, it's engaged. He's later told that the symptoms weren't severe enough to warrant a test.
It's troubling for the patient, but also problematic for doctors, because even if they have difficulty making a decision, we need to consult someone.
The country can now conduct 4,000 tests per day, and Japan's health ministry says from this week it'll be much easier for doctors to order them.
At the very beginning we had a limitation on the capacity, but it is now increasing.
In order to maintain public confidence, Japan's Prime Minister has asked for sporting events and mass gatherings to be postponed, scaled back or cancelled, schools to shut down for more than a month. Even the Olympic Museum is temporarily closed. But he says the Olympic Games themselves are certainly going ahead, with just 4.5 months to go.
The epidemics in the Republic of Korea, Italy, Iran and Japan are our greatest concern.
And the advice for Australians reconsidering visiting Japan.
But they shouldn't cancel their flights.
Please come here.
The next 2 weeks will be crucial and are sure to reveal just how contained the virus is in Japan. Jake Sturmer, ABC News, Tokyo.
3 women left with debilitating pain from faulty pelvic mesh implants have been awarded almost $2.6 million in compensation by the federal court. Multinational healthcare company Johnson & Johnson was last year found to have been negligent in rushing the products onto the market despite knowing the risks. Reporter Leave Casbin was in court today. Leave, what does this decision mean for other women with pelvic implants?
Juanita, it will have major implications for the 1,350 plus women who have joined the class action. The $2.6 million won't be distributed evenly between the 3 applicants. The largest payout of about $1.3 million will go to the lead applicant. Significantly legal discussion today focused on just what the implications will be for these future payouts, setting the framework, if you like, for how those payouts will be determined. Now, the 3 applicants weren't in court here today, but their legal team was, as were some of the women who are party to this class action.
It represents, the significant suffering and loss that they've experienced as a consequence of having these products implanted into them.
I just don't think that really reflects the lifetime damage and loss and pain and suffering and loss of income. I mean, for some women, this has irreparably changed their lives forever.
Now, this afternoon, Johnson & Johnson put out a statement saying that it empathises with women who have experienced these complications. It hasn't yet indicated whether it will appeal the judgment or the damages payout.
Leave Casbin reporting there. There's more financial assistance on the way for people who lost their homes in the recent bushfire crisis. State political reporter Ashley Raper joins me now from State Parliament. Ashley, what's the state government announced?
Juanita, it's announced that people whose houses were destroyed in the bushfires won't have to pay stamp duty should they choose to buy a new home rather than rebuild. The exemption will be capped at $55,000, so it'll apply to homes worth less than $1.3 million. The government says this is about giving people options and says it's confident it won't lead to large people leaving areas devastated by bushfires because most people do want to stay in their community.
And the government's not happy at all about suggestions that it's to blame for the slow delivery of small business grants.
Yes, there's been some finger-pointing going on between the federal and state governments after it was revealed that very little money has gone to help small businesses in areas devastated by bushfire. In fact, in New South Wales, 674 businesses have applied for a grant and only 111 have received money. Yesterday, the federal government blamed New South Wales, saying the Commonwealth provides the funds and it's up to the state to hand them out. But today, the New South Wales government has come out publicly saying it's not its fault, it's the tough rules which are preventing the money going to those in need.
What I won't do as the Deputy Premier of New South Wales, and what I won't do as the Minister responsible for recovery, is accept the blame for something that we have no control over. If the federal government wants the money to roll out, which we want, allow us to design the criteria, which we've done, and approve that criteria.
The federal government insists that the state government agree to the criteria, but says regardless of whether it is restrictive, New South Wales is being too slow to act. Changes are being considered, Juanita, but that won't provide immediate help to those small businesses which desperately need it.
Ashley Raper reporting there. Well, there's no doubt that Sydney had a very warm summer, but what are the temperature trends telling us, Graham?
Well, they're all going in one direction, Juanita, and that is a continuation of an upward trend. Now, the warming trend since 1970 has continued this summer, which is in part due to climate change. And although the temperature trend in the city itself isn't statistically significant against the all-year average temperature, it was actually warmer by 1.6 degrees. Records at Penrith are too short for long-term trends, but 48.9 there on January the 4th was the highest temperature ever measured in the Sydney Basin and the hottest in the state over summer. Now, tomorrow we have a look at some temperature trends in some more regional centres. I'll be back with the forecast shortly.
Thanks, Graham. Still to come this hour, can the record low interest rates revive a faltering economy?
I'd say things are pretty tough. Cost of living is rising all the time.
Not going to do anything for universities, travel agents, supply chains that are being blocked from China. The interest rate is not really the right sort of instrument for this sort of problem.
Also, the Prime Minister Scott Morrison will join me live from Canberra. That's coming up.
Sydney's train network was thrown into chaos this morning after a maintenance vehicle derailed on a section of track near Circular Quay. Frustrated passengers faced delays of up to an hour. Sydney Trains has apologised for the inconvenience.
Morning mayhem for city commuters. At Chatswood, crowds packed in for peak hour, while at Central, the queue to the airport snaked through the station.
It's not a good way to start a day.
I had to work on the train. There's always a delay. That's why it's really frustrating.
Across the network, about 130 train services were impacted, some delayed for over an hour, forcing passengers to catch the light rail instead. It was all because of this, a maintenance ute that came off the track near Circular Quay early in the morning. It took 3 hours to remove.
It jammed itself and the team couldn't release it, and actually it took our emergency crews just to come and jack it up and then release it.
To make matters worse, a trespasser at Central Station caused further problems.
It's another day having to apologise for things like this. It's nobody's fault. They'll get to the bottom of it. Sorry people were inconvenienced.
Despite the delays, customers won't be refunded for this morning's commute, though Transport for New South Wales says it will consider individual cases under special circumstances.
We will consider if someone's missed a flight or there's some major issue, do let us know. We will consider it on a case-by-case basis.
Services were mostly back on track for the evening peak. An investigation into the derailment, including response times, will be carried out. Lydia Feng, ABC News, Sydney.
The Prime Minister has been accused of misleading Parliament multiple times over the sports rorts scandal. Labor made the claim after the Auditor-General revealed that last-minute funding decisions were made after the election was called and following consultation with Scott Morrison's office. Here's political editor Andrew Probyn.
Early on the 11th of April, Scott Morrison made the traditional journey to Yarralumla. Vice-regal assent obtained to head for the polls.
Prorogue the Parliament from 8:29.
With paperwork signed by the Governor-General, major decisions of government were suspended, or so convention dictates, because well after the full-time whistle had been blown on the 45th Parliament, then Sports Minister Bridget McKenzie was still making adjustments to the now infamous spreadsheet that colour-coded sports projects by political party.
Sorting out what the final list of approved projects would look like.
The Audit Office, whose scathing report led to the Minister's resignation, outlining an even more problematic timeline for the Prime Minister.
one project coming out and one project coming in terms of the 8:46am version. That was at the request of the Prime Minister's office.
After another email exchange with the PM's office 4 hours later, further changes.
One project out, 9 in, at 12:43 to Sport Australia.
All 9 late inclusions, projects in government-held seats or electorates being targeted by the coalition.
Colour-coded corruption, and it goes right to the Prime Minister's office.
Caught red-handed. His office, his decision.
The Prime Minister pummeled by allegations of foul play.
It is very clear that this Prime Minister has misled Parliament
the Leader of the Opposition will resume
again. The Leader of the Opposition seeks to come to this dispatch box and treat question time as smear time.
When Bridget McKenzie was forced to resign, the government had hoped her ministerial scalp would provide the rest of Cabinet cover. But new revelations about the way the politically compromised program was administered in the short shadow of an election and with the clear knowledge of the Prime Minister's office has only enlivened the scandal. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
In the US, former Vice President Joe Biden has received a boost in his campaign to become the Democratic presidential nominee, with 2 candidates endorsing him after they quit the race. Ahead of the biggest day of voting, Mr Biden rallied supporters in Texas, emboldened by a win in South Carolina on Saturday.
Just a few days ago, the pundits declared my campaign dead. But then along came South Carolina.
Senator Amy Klobuchar has joined former Mayor Pete Buttigieg in dropping out of the race. Both say they want to unify moderate voters behind Biden. Senator Bernie Sanders remains his main rival. While in Los Angeles, Senator Elizabeth Warren rallied her supporters, hoping to stage a comeback. Well, the Super Tuesday polls get underway tonight. That's when large swathes of the United States vote on the Democratic nominee. The cost of American healthcare is a top concern for voters and one that's being exacerbated by the spread of coronavirus. Last year, more than 137 million Americans struggled with medical debt, and many had to raid their retirement savings or file for bankruptcy. North America correspondent James Glenday reports from the state of Virginia.
In the hills outside Charlottesville, Zan Nelson runs her family's farm. She's very self-sufficient and when diagnosed with cancer, quickly scheduled surgery without seeking a second opinion.
I was containing panic at what was going on in my body.
The operation saved her life, but the $45,000 cost threatened to send her bust. She had no insurance, and in the land of the free, there's only a limited healthcare safety net.
I had no idea, period, what it was going to cost me. I did put my faith completely in this surgeon, and I shouldn't have.
Even some with insurance aren't immune from bill shock. Mother of 4 Amanda Sturgill still in thousands of dollars of debt due to high co-payments from her daughter's back surgery 4 years ago.
I've sold every piece of jewelry that I have. I have nothing. I mean, it was like everything is gone. A lot of times I'll go all day long and I won't eat. I save food and, and that stuff for the kids.
Lawyers say as many as half their bankruptcy cases are largely due to surprise medical costs.
Health coverage in the United States is not great, right? A lot of employers don't offer health insurance or offer bad health insurance.
And experts warn the high price of care has social consequences.
Right now, health authorities are preparing for the coronavirus, hoping to limit its spread throughout the United States. But there are fears that some Americans with mild cases might not seek treatment because of the potential cost.
All the Democrats vying to face Donald Trump at November's election have a proposal to improve the system.
In America, you should not go bankrupt because you're struggling with cancer.
But many forecasters warn frontrunner Bernie Sanders' plan to introduce healthcare coverage for all isn't possible without big, unpopular middle-class tax increases.
So you'd have to triple all payroll taxes, or you'd have to double all income taxes, both individual and corporate.
Regardless, Zan Nelson will be voting for a Democrat this year.
It's a human right to be able to be healthy.
She thinks it's about time someone takes on the powerful medical industry and shakes up the status quo. James Glenday, ABC News, Charlottesville.
In finance, the big news today was the cut in interest rates to a record low, largely in response to the coronavirus impact. With more on that, here's Alan Kohler.
The dollar popped up at 2.30 even though interest rates were cut, because by the time the decision was announced, markets were pricing a 56% chance of a 0.5% cut. So a lot of traders had to quickly adjust their positions when it turned out to be only 0.25%. Tonight, the dollar is trading at 65.5 US cents, up on last night, but still a 6% devaluation from January the 1st. Next is expected to be fiscal stimulus, that is cash from the budget. And it's worth knowing that the surplus predicted just 3 months ago has already been lost. No hope of getting there before the government does anything. Meanwhile, a global share market rally last night was sparked by this statement from the chairman of the Federal Reserve in the US, Jerome Powell. The coronavirus poses evolving risks, he said, and the Fed will use its tools and act as appropriate to support the economy. American stocks jumped 4.5%, and one of the biggest rises was retailer Costco because of panic buying of bulk products, and especially toilet paper for some reason. It's global, actually. Toilet paper shelves are empty everywhere. Forget coronavirus, there's a worldwide dunny roll crisis. Our share market rose a more subdued 0.9%, and big gains included BHP, Coles, Telstra and CSL. And by the way, CSL became Australia's largest listed company today, knocking off Commonwealth Bank for the first time, $142 billion versus $140. There were strong gains on commodity markets last night as well. And finally, rest in peace, Australian Associated Press, the newswire business mostly owned by News Corp and Nine Network, but no longer wanted. It's closing at a cost of 180 jobs. And that's finance.
Australian batter Beth Mooney believes the team can still win the T20 World Cup, even without Elise Perry, who's been ruled out of the rest of the tournament. Perry suffered a high-grade hamstring injury in yesterday's win over New Zealand and will also miss this month's tour of South Africa. Australia needs to replace the star all-rounder for Thursday's semi-final against either South Africa or England.
Whilst we don't have an exact replica for Elise Perry, we've got the same character and fight in those players that we do in Elise. So I have no doubt that whoever it is that steps up and takes her place in the 11 will do an outstanding job for the Australian team.
Wet weather is predicted for Thursday in Sydney, and if Australia's semi-final is washed out, it would miss out on the final due to finishing second in its group. Well, speaking about wet weather, the rain that was forecast has started falling, Graham.
Yes, it has. It's been a little bit slow in getting here, but we did see a very overcast day. That patchy rain reached Sydney late this afternoon, and it will actually become a lot more widespread and localised heavier falls developing overnight tonight. The showers in the upper and lower west also tended to some areas of rain. There were even some isolated thunderstorms, and they spread east into the central tablelands, and then we saw the rain push towards the Hunter through to the Illawarra. Falls in the east, though, have been pretty patchy and light so far. Grasmere, which sits between Fowler's Gap and Wilcannia, has recorded the heaviest of the falls, in excess of 44 millimetres now, and that's the state's heaviest so far. Now, all this rain's due to ex-tropical cyclone Esther, which is moving along a deepening trough over the western inland of the state. The low itself will enter the northwest of New South Wales tomorrow and then over the southeast on Thursday. That will have the influence of intensifying the rainfall over parts of the inland and southeast of the New South Wales. The severe weather warning is in place for heavy rain through to Thursday. This extends from the northwest to the southeast corner of the state. There is also a flood watch for the Murrumbidgee, Tumut, Queanbeyan and Belubula rivers. Now, heavy rain is forecast for Canberra. We've got a flood watch for nearby rivers. Alice Springs is the only other capital likely to record some heavy falls. We will see quite a bit of heavy rainfall, though, between both those centres. We've got a hazardous surf warning. This is for the Macquarie Coast through to the Batemans Coast. Much of the northwest slopes and plains and nearby northern tablelands will remain dry, with only patchy light falls anywhere south of a line from Broken Hill to Echuca. So patchy rain across the Hunter, though more likely about the southern half. Elsewhere, rain will be patchy and light and more afternoon shower and thunderstorm based. Possible thunderstorms on the waters north and north ahead in the afternoon and evening. Cloudy with widespread rain, heavy falls on the tablelands and coastal ranges, especially about the southern tablelands and the Snowy Mountains. Cooler conditions, although it will remain humid. Reduced visibility on the waters with rain and thunderstorms. Mostly dry for the northwest slopes and plains and far southwest corner. Widespread rain, isolated thunderstorms elsewhere with localised heavy falls. Now, some powerful surf, and that'll make conditions hazardous for rock fishing. We've got lows of 17 to 20. Our tops will range from 23 to 25. Overcast tomorrow, rain with a good chance of widespread falls of 10 to 30 millimetres across the Sydney Basin. Now, it looks as though it's going to pour down every single day, but it'll be mostly dry Friday. But the showers come back over the weekend, Juanita.
Thanks for that, Graham. Lee Sales is here now with 7:30.